Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Accessibility Talks. We're glad you could join us for our monthly virtual meetup on accessibility, inclusion, and usability. It's a space where we learn from guest speakers and connect as a community. I am your host, Tobias Williams. I'm a senior software engineer at Red Hat, and as a visual description, I am a white man in a pink knit hat. Before we get started, I'd like to give a quick reminder that Ali Talks is dedicated to maintaining a safe and welcoming environment. We ask everyone joining us today, speakers and attendees alike, to follow our code of conduct in the chat and during discussions. You can find a full version on our website. Our goal is to ensure a respectful space for open dialogue and learning. We also want to take a moment to thank our partners who make the Ali Talks possible. Special thank you to our bronze supporter, Principal Financial Group. We also want to recognize our Ali Cat Club members. Every contribution helps us keep this community growing, our content free, and our talks accessible to everyone. If you'd like to support Ali Talks as a sponsor, please visit our website to learn more. Your contributions go directly towards compensating speakers and improving our events. You can also double your impact through corporate matching programs like Benevity. Just search for us under Ali Talks by Midwest Open Source Alliance. If you have any questions for our speaker, you can ask while watching the live premiere on YouTube. You can also go to the chat function there and you can leave questions in the chat or go to LinkedIn or any other social media channel and we will get those questions to our speaker to be answered for you. Today we have Eleanor Beilby, a Learning Technology Coordinator for Curtin University and founder of MuddleMend. She is presenting on tech as cognitive accessibility, designing systems for ADHD brains. I did it. A fun fact about you is that you are from Perth in Western Australia, which is the most geographically isolated city on Earth. How does that impact living in Perth?
It was great over COVID. I'm not gonna
Okay.
lie. We were pretty removed from it all in terms of and we're a pretty beachfront town.
Mhm.
So it was a lot of and especially remote from the other side of Australia as well.
Uh-huh.
We did still stick to social isolating and everything
Right.
properly, but yeah, no, compared to some of the lockdown strictness and rules, we just had so much land. So it was
Yeah. That's awesome.
the one good thing about being so far away.
Yeah. So before I turn it over to you, I have a Australia question. So I grew up in a country that gets a lot of Australian TV. Um, were you more of a neighbors or a home and away person, or
I
neither?
did both.
You did
I did
both?
both. Yeah, I
Oh,
started out with Neighbours
okay,
as a kid, and then to Home and Away as a teenager. I did
okay.
both.
They were on separate channels for us, and they
Yeah, they're on
competed.
separate channels for us too.
But they competed, so you had to choose. So I was neighbors when I was younger. Anyway, okay. Thank you for answering that question. I like to ask everyone I meet from Australia whether they like neighbors or home and away. I will turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Hi everyone. So before I properly begin, I'm going to conduct a quick experiment. I'm going to do my introduction now, and I want you to estimate how long I speak for. And here's the caveat: you're not allowed to look at any clocks, watches, or your phone. I want you to just use your internal sense of time. Are you ready? Starting now. Hi everyone, I'm Eleanor Beilby. As mentioned, I'm the Learning Technology Coordinator at Curtin University, but on the side, I run MuddleMend, which is my little educational platform to help adults with ADHD use everyday technology as cognitive accommodations. And I do this through helpful practical guides and tech frameworks. Now, before moving into learning design, I worked for years as an app designer. So I've always had a close, sometimes codependent relationship with technology. Ironically, that's part of why I was diagnosed with ADHD quite late. I had already built so many systems to function that I didn't realize they were accommodations. But it was during my time working at Curtin, supporting the academics to help them use technology for learning, that I realized something important. There was a much bigger need to extend this kind of support to late diagnosed adults with ADHD. Many are autodidactic, self directed learners who want to find their own solutions, but lack the frameworks and resources. Setting up tech accommodations is traditionally an OT or coach's job, but not everyone can access that support, and many prefer to figure things out for themselves. So that's kind of why I helped to create ModelMend. We're going to help translate accessibility and learning design principles into technology configurable systems that people can actually use. And today I'm going to show you how. Okay, how do we go? I actually forgot to time it, but from before, I think it comes out at around 1:40. So, if you were close, that's great. But if you were way off, you're actually not alone. That example is called time blindness, which is the difficulty accurately perceiving time passing. And for many people, like myself with ADHD, there isn't a reliable internal sense of whether it's been 5 minutes or 50 minutes. And it's not that you lost track of time, it's that your brain actually wasn't keeping track of it in the first place. And this isn't due to willpower or discipline, it's actually a difference in how ADHD brains process information. So, let's see the scale of the issue. Over 500,000 Australian adults have ADHD, which is more than the population of Canberra. I hope people can understand that reference. That figure doesn't include the many adults who remain undiagnosed but already experience ADHD-related struggles in their everyday life. Now, ADHD is legally covered under the Disability Discrimination Act, which means reasonable adjustments are required. The technology exists, the principles exist, but we're not actually connecting them and helping people use everyday tech as cognitive accommodations. So today, I'm going to introduce a framework to help with cognitive accessibility. I'm going to start with the principles, translate them into implementation, and use feedback loops. And along the way, we'll answer who needs this, what is it, when it matters, why WCAG and COGA provide the foundations, and how to build it and where it applies. So, before we talk about solutions, we need to be clear on what ADHD actually is. ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition affecting attention, memory, time, emotion, and action. Many adults are only being diagnosed later in life now, despite experiencing symptoms their entire lives. Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the most cited ADHD researchers in the world, reframes all of this in a way I find really useful. He argues that ADHD isn't really a disorder of attention at all. It's a disorder of self-regulation and executive function. It's not that we don't know what to do, it's the gap between knowing and doing. But here's what makes ADHD different. ADHD brains have lower baseline dopamine, which means everyday tasks don't produce the same reward signals, and delayed gratification, doing something now for a benefit later, actually becomes much harder. The ADHD brain feeds on immediacy and impulse. That's why behavioral strategies that work for neurotypical people often fail for those of us with ADHD. It's the neurochemical feedback loop that is fundamentally different. And here's the gap. Getting a diagnosis can actually take months. And even once you're diagnosed, people are often left to figure out how to function on their own. And again, so many are diagnosed later in life with deeply embedded coping strategies that actually no longer serve them. So most ADHD support kind of falls into two categories. You have your clinical interventions, such as medication, therapy, and diagnosis. And then it tends to lean to self-help productivity advice, like just use a planner, or set better habits, or try harder. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my meds, and medication can help with impulsivity and concentration, but it doesn't change the behavior patterns. As the saying goes, pills don't teach skills. But medication does create a window where system building becomes possible. The principles exist, and our accessibility standards help give us a framework for reducing the mental effort required for everyday tasks. Now, we're not just using everyday tech as cognitive accommodations, we're actually teaching people how to configure their devices for ADHD. Now, when does this matter? This matters right now. In Australia, we are facing a significant ADHD medication shortage, with impacts expected to last right through till late 2026, which means that non-pharmacological support isn't just helpful, it's actually essential. These neurotypes need psychoeducation. We need practical support to learn new ways of living that support with their brain, not against it. But to understand how to build these systems, we first need to understand the gap in current accessibility standards. Cognitive accessibility is about reducing the mental effort everyday tasks take, understanding what to do, remembering it, starting it, and following through. Accessibility standards work well for digital interfaces such as websites and apps. But here's the gap. For ADHD and executive function, barriers show up in everyday environments. Getting out of bed in the morning, starting a task you've been avoiding, knowing when to leave for an appointment, remembering what you walked into a room for. Now, these aren't screen problems, they're actually environmental problems. So we need to extend these digital principles into physical environments. For executive function, accessibility actually lives in the setup. This approach is grounded in research. And again, Dr. Russell Barkley, the researcher I mentioned earlier, he advocates for environmental engineering, where you modify the environment, not the person. As he puts it, ADHD is a disorder of performance, of knowing what you know rather than of doing what you know rather than knowing what to do. Oof. This means support needs to be in the moment, in the environment, when the challenge happens. That distinction changes everything. If the barrier were knowledge, the information alone would be sufficient. But because the barrier is our performance, information isn't enough. The environment itself has to do some of the work. Now, Dr. Barkley has a name for this, the point of performance, the place and time where the behaviour is actually required. Interventions lose their power the further they sit away from it, which is exactly why the environment is the right place to put the support. It's the thing that's already there. His advice is to externalise. Take what an ADHD brain struggles to hold internally, information, time, the steps of a plan, and push it out into the physical world where it can be seen and acted on, or make the internal external. So what does this look like in practice? First, we make information visible. Don't make working memory hold the routine. Move it onto something the world can show you. Make time visible. Time blindness needs an anchor outside of your head. Put it where you can see it. Shrink the task. Break longer routines into smaller steps that are easier to start and finish. Again, support the thinking outside of your head. Use external structure to reduce internal problem-solving load. The thinking happens on the page, not in your skull. And protect executive energy. Breaks, movement, routine, and recovery aren't extras. They're part of the support system itself. His approach incorporates low-tech solutions such as timers, visual cues, physical reminders that help build structure into our daily life. Now, I feel we can take this a step further with everyday technology. Millions of people already own smartphones and smart devices, and we can use these as environmental engineering tools when configured as cognitive accommodations. But right now, we're not. So, hey, I know, you might be thinking, surely you can't just plug in a smart bulb and suddenly cure time blindness. And you're right. That's exactly why building systems based on principles is key. For those unfamiliar, the WCAG stands for the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They are the international standards used to make websites and digital content accessible to people with disabilities. They guide how we design interfaces so people can perceive information, navigate systems, and complete tasks without unnecessary barriers. But the WCAG was built mostly for perceptual and physical access, vision, hearing, movement. The part written specifically for brains like ours sits at a deeper level. Within the W3C, there's a group called COGA, the Cognitive and Learning Disabilities Accessibility Task Force, and their whole job is help to reduce cognitive barriers. Their design objectives are things like help users focus, reduce memory, give people enough time, and support personalization. So what if we took those cognitive objectives and applied them not to a website, but to our personal tech? Your phone stops being a communication or procrastination device, and it starts becoming assistive technology. Let me show you what that looks like. I've taken some of the WCAG and COGA guidelines and applied an accommodation to each. So, where the WCAG says give people enough time, guideline 2.2, we can use location-based reminders instead of easily mistimed ones. And we can use alarms and routines that don't punish you for running late. No aggressive session timeouts. The COGA Objective 5 says help users focus. An ADHD accommodation could be focus modes that silence notifications during work, or a smart light that shifts to signal a change of activity. For COGA Objective 6, ensure processes do not rely on memory. We could have persistent reminders on our lock screens, or automated routines that run a multi-step task so you don't have to hold each step in your head. For COGA Objective 8, support adaptation and personalization, we can have customizable systems. Some people might need a color-coded calendar, others need ambient lighting, and some need voice capture. We're not inventing new principles here. We're translating the WCAG and cognitive accessibility principles that already exist and extending them beyond the screen into our everyday environments. Okay then, so you're probably thinking, how do I actually do this? Well, you need three things: the technology, the devices and digital automations, the implementation plan, the if-then logic applied to your specific barrier, and a feedback loop, the data that shows whether it's working. Let me unpack each of these. Once you've identified your barrier, you start with a plan. This is called behavioral engineering, designing environments where the desired behavior is simply easier than the impulsive one. This structure is called if-then planning. If X happens, then I will do Y. By building a plan ahead of time, you remove the need to decide in the moment. Smart home automations work exactly this way. Instead of, if it's 7 a.m., I'll turn on the lights, the system does it. If it's 7 a.m., lights turn on. You've removed the need to remember, decide, or initiate. Second is the technology. A lot of it is the tech you already own. Your smartphone, smart bulbs, or your voice assistant becomes the infrastructure that helps execute your plan. And the third is the feedback loop. Now, through resilience engineering, we actually plan for failure. We build systems that reveal when they're not working. The technology generates data. Your screen time shows your attention patterns. Your smart home can log when your automation has triggered or failed, and your calendar density can show your cognitive load. This lets you observe two things. Does the plan match your actual behavior? And is your symptom being relieved? Technology becomes not just an external brain, but a feedback loop, so you can adapt systematically without needing someone telling you off. So, let me adapt this further. In accessibility work, there's usually a distinction. Accessibility is proactive and accommodations are reactive. But cognitive accessibility works differently. When executive function is the barrier, what we call accommodations are really accessibility in action. They're systems that adapt to the person, not a band-aid solution applied after the fact. So let's look at some classic ADHD symptoms and see how some of the WCAG and COGA principles translate into everyday tech. Working memory. Trouble with short-term memory and recalling information. What people love to suggest. Just write it down. And that still assumes you remember to write it down. and then to remember where you wrote it, and then to remember where you put that note after you wrote it. And here's what can actually help digitally. Voice capture with AI, using ChatGPT Voice or Notebook LM to ramble thoughts aloud, and your AI can help organize them and categorize them into tasks. Or automatic logging through things like Apple Shortcuts or Android Tasker that can track your location and your activity without you manually entering it. Or my personal favorite, using audiobooks as a body double. You can pair podcasts or audiobooks with physical tasks, and your audio anchors your attention while your hands stay busy and my dishes get done. Your memory moves out of your head and into the environment. Symptom number 2, task initiation paralysis. The inability to start tasks, even simple or important ones. What people love to suggest is break the task down, which does help sometimes. But often the barrier isn't the complexity, it's actually the initiation itself. So here's some things that can help. Friction reduction. Again, through shortcuts or routines to help bundle your steps into one tap. Environmental triggers, such as your smart bulb changing colour for work mode, motion sensors to trigger your coffee maker in the morning, or a task list as soon as you enter the kitchen. And AI for decision paralysis, again asking ChatGPT or Claude to break overwhelming tasks into those first fundamental steps. The initiation becomes environmental, not psychological. Time blindness. The inability to accurately perceive time passing. What people love to suggest is wear a watch or just be more aware of time. But when your brain can't track time passing, trying to be more cognitively aware of it doesn't magically create the ability. Here's what can actually help. Again, ambient lighting. If your light bulb changes colour throughout the day, such as warm yellow in the morning, white at midday, and a soft orange at nighttime. Location-based triggers, or remind me when I get home instead of remind me at 3 p.m. Smart home scenes, so your lights can shift automatically to mark transitions and visual time blocking, such as your calendar on a lock screen or a mounted tablet showing your day at a glance. This helps time become visible instead of invisible. Now, let me show you what this looks like in practice. Meet Sarah. Sarah has ADHD. Sarah consistently stays up way too late due to time blindness from doom scrolling. She knows she should go to bed at 9 p.m, but sometimes 9 p.m. magically turns into midnight. Now, the solution here isn't just try harder, it's environmental design. So this is her setup. At 9 p.m, she has a smart bulb that fades from white to orange over 30 minutes. At 9:30, a notification prompts start bedtime routine. Tapping it triggers her iPhone's bedtime focus mode, her notifications quiet, and her screen winds down. She didn't have to remember anything. The environment helped make time visible. And here's the crucial part. We can observe whether it works. Her bedtime completion logs show patterns over weeks. Her screen time data shows whether she actually used bedtime mode. Her smart bulb logs whether the automation triggered reliably. Now this has the data to help us reveal, is she getting to bed earlier? Are there nights that the system fails? Does she need to start the slow fade a little bit earlier, or does it need to last longer? She's no longer guessing whether the system works. She can see it, and more importantly, she can adapt it. Now, why this isn't just productivity hacks. In the world of productivity optimization, they love to say, you're capable of functioning, here's how to do more. Whereas accessibility accommodation says, your environment is creating barriers. Here's how to reduce the cognitive demand required for basic functioning. Productivity asks you to do more. Accessibility changes the environment so you don't have to. That distinction matters. Now, good cognitive accessibility works when you forget it exists, doesn't rely on motivation, and still functions on low capacity days. Setting up everyday technology for ADHD is accessibility, not optimization. It's changing the environment, not asking you to try harder. Again, this principle is simple. Change the environment, not the person. Setting up everyday technology for ADHD applies that principle. It's a cognitive accommodation. It's not a productivity hack. Now, the gap is in education, not software. Critically, this isn't about building new apps or proprietary platforms. The technology already exists. Smartphones, smart bulbs, voice assistants. Now, the principles exist. We've just mentioned that the WCAG and COGA gives us a framework. But what's missing? We're not using everyday tech to make these accommodations. We're not teaching people how to configure what they already have. Now, traditionally, setting up accommodations is an OT or even an ADHD coach's job, that one-on-one personalized support. And that is incredibly valuable work. And for some people, that is enough. But for many late diagnosed adults with ADHD, again, some of them are autodidactic learners who want to figure things out for themselves, but they lack the frameworks to do so effectively. What's needed is the guidance to teach people how to set up their tech to help with their symptoms, how to identify which cognitive barriers technology could address, which tools to use, how to configure them accounting for executive function, how to measure effectiveness using passive data, and how to adapt systematically without coaching dependency. This isn't replacing professional support. It's providing an alternative pathway for self-directed learners. It's documentation that scales for people who prefer or need to build their own systems. Now, I do really want to get personal for a moment because this isn't just theoretical for me. I've been told I'm too dependent on my phone and that I should use technology less. But here's what that assumes: that there's a more virtuous way to function without technology. For someone with ADHD, the alternative isn't doing it the natural way. The alternative is not being able to do it at all. The social model of disability tells us disability is created by barriers, not by bodies. When we tell people with ADHD to reduce screen time, we're removing the accommodation and then blaming them for the resulting struggle. That dependency, it's often the only thing standing between me and complete dysfunction. It's not a crutch, it's assistive technology that makes participation possible. Dependence on accessibility infrastructure isn't weakness, it's appropriate accommodation. When we configure technology with visibility and feedback built in, we stop asking people to compensate for broken systems. We fix the systems. So, where do we go from here? Now, if you're an accessibility practitioner, start asking about executive function accommodations the same way you ask about mobility or vision accommodations. Include cognitive load in your audits. If you're in healthcare or education, recognize that reduced screen time might be removing someone's assistive technology. Ask instead, how can we configure your devices to support your cognitive needs? And if you're someone with ADHD, you're incredibly good looking, and you are not weak for depending on technology. You're appropriately accommodated, and you deserve implementation frameworks that actually work for executive dysfunction, not against it, and you deserve support that fits. It's incredibly important that we don't just diagnose late identified ADHD adults, medicate them, and throw them to the wolves. Just because someone has been coping for years doesn't mean they've been thriving. By providing accessible frameworks for accommodations and self-autonomy, individuals who have been at a disadvantage for years finally get their power back. We have the technology, we have the principles. Now we need to recognize that everyday devices configured intentionally are cognitive accommodations for ADHD. The goal isn't to make people try harder. It's to build systems that work when they can't. Thank you.
Awesome. That was fantastic. um, yeah, I've never heard a talk like that before. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of our questions, I was reading through them as you were talking, and they kind
Hmm.
of been answered, but maybe it will help
I did.
focus.
I did see that a little bit beforehand, but
Uh,
I'm happy to.
yeah,
I
I
am
think I
happy
think it
to.
will help refocus some of the
Mm,
information there. So
okay.
we'll go through them, and we can not use
Mm,
them if we
yeah, yeah, yeah.
don't. Okay, so for you, what made ADHD support feel like access to learning and environments versus it just being a productivity tool?
When I was actually able to complete the tasks that I set out to do,
Hmm.
I had to be very honest with myself and realize how disabling my disability was after
Hmm.
first being diagnosed. And that was quite a hard time, as I feel like a lot of people will admit. But by actually being honest with myself and leaning into it about the supports that I needed, I was finally able to actually structure it accordingly and reverse engineer it in a way. Yeah.
We'll talk. There's a couple of questions about the WCAG guidelines. So for 2.2 criteria, where we're talking about consistent help or redundant entry, is either of those more useful for helping ADHD?
Ooh, redundant entry.
Okay.
Redundant entry. Yeah, I would say so. Um, I mean, given again, it's so personalized for the individual,
Mhm,
but I feel that consistent help can be helpful, but a lot of the time, again, with that sense of autonomy, people want to do it themselves and they
mhm.
want to, again, redundant entry would kind of be the better
Yeah,
helpful point there.
okay. And when did technology last work with your brain instead of against it? I feel like the whole talk was about when the technology working with your brain.
My favorite is I have my smart hub pods around my house and
Mhm.
I ask it my, oh, I don't want to say
Yeah.
SIRI too loud.
Mhm.
I ask my where my phone is about
Mhm.
5, 6 minimum times a day, and and it's been incredible for
Yeah,
that alone.
yeah, that's great. When we do accessibility audits,
Mm.
why do you think that the cognitive accessibility is not a feature of that? Like I said, this is the first time I've heard about it talk like
Mm.
this. Like, and I'm active in this community. So, why do you think that it's less included?
I think because it's less visible, to be honest, it's
Mm-hmm.
not seen, and um, which is amazing because a lot of the time, so many people that have physical impairments will also like, there's I've spoken to many people at conferences and things who are blind and also have ADHD, or who like are which so
Yeah.
it doesn't actually help in terms of adding to that kind of cognitive load of functioning. And I think it's because you can't see it. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I feel like that also doesn't. I'm very privileged to be able-bodied,
Mm-hmm.
so that is it makes you feel lesser. Like, oh well, I can walk, therefore, what am I complaining about?
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's still valid is
Right.
the,
Yeah. Yeah.
the key point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when what design patterns, like clean or minimum design patterns, are the least useful for ADHD?
Ooh. Um, Anything that has a large amount of white space, I
Hmm.
kind of say people with ADHD, that kind of short attention span is they want that quick delivery of information 9 times
Hmm.
out of 10. So being able to kind of something that you have to have parallax scroll for 10 miles to actually get to what they're
Yeah.
saying, or a poster that's hidden the date somewhere down there to be really artsy. The frustration tolerance and the smaller amount of like, I can't read this information. I can't, where am I going?
Yeah.
I feel like that, yeah, that kind of style. is a bit lost on ADHD audiences.
Yeah, that's good. And how does executive function, dysfunction and time blindness show up in like our everyday tools? Like you mentioned calendars and stuff like that earlier.
Again, it's time. The classic one for kind of time blindness is setting a million alarms, but that's a very classic one for people don't use it and people don't do it and people don't. But one of the ones that I find can be really helpful that I've noticed a lot of tools have started to implement is notify me 15 minutes before or
Mhm.
notify me half an hour before. So that is kind of a new level of accommodation in tools that I think is actually quite helpful because it's not, oh, I've got an appointment at 1. It's, oh, I need to leave at 12:30 in order to get to my appointment at 1. I can't just magically appear there. I forgot it. And transition time
Mhm.
is something that it's been nice to see a lot of calendars kind of, or digital tools immediately start to build that in, which is, yeah, very helpful.
Yeah. That's great. I think that um, when you mentioned it in your talk, the like and you just said about, oh well, you why don't you just set multiple reminders? Is like, but then you also have to do that. Like you have to, and yeah, that I was like, oh, that clicked for me. I was like, that makes
If you
total
can,
sense.
and I think it's one of these things where you set it up for yourself on a good brain day for when
Yeah.
you know you're going to have bad brain days. So it's looking out for your future self from your past self. And often I'm like, thanks, past me. I actually did this like that. Yeah.
So what no code workflows would you point to someone who has recognized themselves in your talk?
Ooh, yes. Ooh, okay. Um, so starting out with my favorite that I feel like is also a good learning point is NFC tags, because once you can configure an NFC tag, you'll learn shortcuts, automations, and they're the kind of easiest one to jump into. My favorite hack that I like to try and tell people is if you have short lasting medication like dexamphetamine, if you put an NFC tag on the lid of your medication and set a shortcut to for an alarm to go off in 3 hours or 2 hours, however long it takes, you actually remember to keep taking your meds because you're like, why is my phone going off? That's the one time alarms are actually really helpful. It's like, oh, it's my medication alarm. Oh,
Yeah.
so that would be that build and that system is a great way to jump into learning about it all. And a lot of the time, shortcuts and automations are free and they're built into your phone automatically. You don't have to buy anything, you don't have to pay for anything. And you can buy a pack of NFC tags for like $10.
Can you
And
explain NFC tags? I haven't
yeah,
heard that
yeah,
before.
yeah. Let me see if I can. I actually probably have one. I usually have. Here's one I prepared earlier. Here's a whole bag I prepared earlier. So this is an NFC tag. It's got a little
Okay.
sticker on the back. Where it's used more commonly is actually, when you pay with your phone for
Yeah.
things. It's already
Okay.
built into your card. So when you do the tap to pay and things, that's using, it's called near field communication
Okay.
technology. So if your phone or what have you is within a certain like 2 to 3 centimeters, it'll
Mhm.
pick up on whatever you've programmed on here. So I also have one on my desk that puts my phone into grayscale mode and mutes all my distracting social media. So it's like my little
Wow.
looker tag. I've heard of people having one next to the pet bowl for couples that work shift work, and they're like, did I feed the dog? And then it taps and it's like, oh, did I feed the dog? And so it kind of goes to a shared note where it's like dog fed on July 2nd, and you're like, aha, see, like the or things like that, like
That is amazing.
yeah.
Okay. So we had mentioned you had mentioned in your talk the work the COGA COGA I think
Mhm.
is the
The
an
Koga task
acronym.
force. Yeah.
Yeah. So does that is that going to be, you might not know the answer to this, but is that going to be integrated into the WCAG guidelines, or is that going to live separately? Um,
I believe, see, I've only became familiar with Koga this year
okay.
because I didn't realize that a lot of it was kind of adapting the WCAG principles into its own task force. So it's
Okay.
its own kind of separate division where they're
Mhm.
currently making standards and ways of optimizing digital interface and solutions for cognitive accessibility. So, like all the other kind of task force with the W3C, I'm not too sure about the implementation plan with the WCAG, but I do know that they are there and advocating and a task force.
Yeah,
They
that's
have
great.
their own bodies and principles and rules of cognitive accessibility and frameworks to follow. They're
Okay,
just great.
one. Yeah, no, it sounds awesome. I looked it up while you were talking, and I have it open. I'm going to read through it afterwards. Okay, last question. How do you cut memory load without stripping away like the needed depth, like the information that's
Oh, that's good. That's a
there?
very good question. Um, my favorite thing to do for me personally is I like to say, explain it to me like I'm 5.
Okay.
So if it's a big principle of this and this, but a lot of the time I say, if it's not written down, it's not going to happen. So if it's, I don't like verbal instructions, summaries and follow ups. So anything that can be recorded, be that physically, digitally, voice, to limit the amount of verbal processing to reduce that cognitive processing. So anything that can be translated into text, um, or and then if it's a really big piece of new information, grasping the bare bones and then moving up. So just that scaffolding.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you, Eleanor. Let's continue the conversation on our LinkedIn event, and you can find us at LinkedIn at linkedin.com/company A11YTALKS, which is Ali Talks. We're always looking for new voices, especially from marginalized groups in tech. You can visit our speakers page to learn more, or reach out on LinkedIn, or email us directly at team@Ali Talks, which is A11YTALKS.com, to start that conversation. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel where you are watching this video. We're also on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. You can find all these links on our website. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time.